So we have a problem that started 24 years ago for why you keep having the tightness in certified stocks on a more frequent basis. And when I look at the Brazilian 24-25 crop that was just harvested, so there's quality concerns. So is there going to be coffee from that harvest that is going to be delivered against the New York market? And if it's based on how much semi-washed coffee they made, it's going to be a lot less. So Brazil isn't going to be the fallback for getting coffee to the board. And so I look at it as what is going to have to happen with the market structure to get coffee delivered.
This episode is proudly brought to you by Mapper Forward's workshop, It's Time to Become a Coffee Consultant. Learn how to diversify your revenue streams and create freedom from your day job while saying goodbye to that alarm clock forever by becoming a consultant within the coffee industry or directly to consumers who have shifted towards home brewing and home roasting. Protect your income from challenging times in the coffee value chain by taking this course today. Go to mapperforward.coffee/workshops or click the link in the show notes for details. Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is episode 3 of a 5-part series with the fabulous Judy Ganes, where we're talking about market structure and certified stocks in coffee. Now, we are privileged to have you here, Judy, and in this episode, we're talking about how does this whole thing that we're talking about relate to prices and overall global supply outlook. I want to start this conversation by asking you a question. Do you believe coffee is in crisis?
You know what? I've seen this before, and most times when people talk about coffee in crisis, they're really talking about a period of very depressed levels for producers, and they're not making money, as opposed to being crisis where prices have been very attractive to increase productivity. The problem we're facing is climatic issues.
Which is why I think it turns it into a crisis rather than a problem, because these are forces that are outside of our control.
Well, they are, but is this just a period that we're going through right now, or are is the weather going to improve? And is it going to just be, that this has been several years of erratic weather that has been unfortunate. So, time will tell on that one.
Okay.
I mean, I believe that there's, certainly we're seeing hotter and hotter days, that there's challenges. And for me, the question is, how does the industry work hand in hand together and figure out how to survive that? And that becomes relationship building, and it becomes science of how to have better varieties that are disease resistant, or how do you shorten the growing cycle, or how do you grow coffee in other countries in different altitudes and maintain a lot of the clonal varieties and not lose some of that characteristics. That is the sad part, is that some of the traditional coffees that people become accustomed to, the genuine coffees, are they going to be lost because of climate change? They're no longer feasible. But then what can come in and replace that?
And I want to say that recently I've been having conversations with producers, and I think that we need to start talking more in this industry about regenerative farming and coffee that comes from farms that are focused on regenerative farming. And the reason is because the sustainability of these farms has a better trajectory. They have a much longer vision than farms that are using monocropping. And these are producers that are very focused on working in the harmony of nature and not just having coffee as the only crop that they have on their farm. And so therefore they are a little more agile. They can move with the seasons a little better, and they're looking at building a long-term trajectory. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because we need to start talking about this much more on this podcast, about the idea of regenerative farming. So you will start hearing us talking much more about it over the coming months. So if we go back to what we're talking about.
Okay, can I add something to that?
Yes,
though?
please, of course.
So, you talked about having different crops, and remember, coffee is a tree. So it's very easy for a grain crop. So you rotate between cotton and soybeans or peanuts, and you let some of your land lay idle, and so you can replenish the nutrients in the soil. When you have a tree crop, it's very different. I mean, there's a longer lead time. There's the expense. You don't have the income in 5 months like you do with some of the other cash crops.
Yeah.
So you have to find a way to intercrop where you can do both, and where on an off year you have income stream. So it's not only about the soil, and which is super important. I mean, you look at cocoa. Cocoa depletes the soil, and one of the ways of maintaining production is you just kind of move. And the cocoa belt moves in West Africa and Ghana and the Ivory Coast. Well, you can't do that anymore, because then it's going into areas that you're deforesting. And so you have to work with the land that you have and make it so it's sustainable. Now, in Vietnam, they're wonderful about intercropping and rotating what they're intercropping based on the price. So when black pepper prices were astronomical, well, there you saw it. There's a lot of intercropping with black pepper, but black pepper's tiny. Okay. Now you're intercropping with durian. And so it's a little different. So that's kind of like encroaching on some of the coffee areas, and farmers making decisions based on that. I've seen intercropping with papaya in Brazil, and avocado and mango, flower. So it really depends on the situation. So some of it is the need to work with the soil and figure out how to sustain the nutrients. And the other side of it is providing additional income, because there are going to be times where coffee growing isn't going to be profitable.
And if you're a coffee producer,
reality.
And if you're a coffee producer listening to this, the two sources that I would encourage you to get in contact with is Bodega de la Finca. Angela was on the podcast talking about biochar, etc., or FAF Coffee in Brazil. Bodega de la Finca is in Colombia, and FAF is in Brazil. That was Felipe Croce. Those are people who have working, living, thriving farms that are working on these kinds of things. They have wood growing on there. They have food crops growing on there other than coffee in being intercropped. These are things that feed the people that are on the farm, as well as regenerate the soil as the crops are moving. So in my mind, this is one of the ways that we are going to be able to, grow as despite what's going on with the weather. We're going to be moving in that direction. We have to, otherwise what's going to happen? The monocropping is just depleting the soil in an unsustainable way. So we'll see what happens. Now,
so we have some loose ends from the last podcast.
Let's do that.
We should tie up also.
Yes. Go for it.
Okay. We're talking about differentials and sort of that history on it, and what drives coffee to the board with forest certified stock or not. And now in 2000, when farmers started to take that decision that we're going to focus on the improving the quality, then they're getting positive differentials. They're not going to deliver coffee to the board. And so you've had this steady progression where there hasn't been that many origins that were being delivered. one by one. So Colombia, Guatemala, Costa Rica. I mean, they just were not delivering coffee to the board because they were at a positive differential. Now, a number of years ago, Honduras had record crop. And so there were several million bags of Honduran coffee that was delivered to the board and helped to replenish the supply. And then that slowly started to work off because that coffee started to receive age-related discounts and became very attractively priced for roasters to use in blends compared to going into the cash market. And so that coffee started to be worked off, and now there's very little Honduran coffee. Because the Honduran coffee is now at a positive differential. And then you had in 2021, so the Brazilian 2021 crop was an excellent crop. It was a record crop and the quality was good. And so you wound up having a lot of the semi-washed coffee and the board differentials were weak. And so the board was the best buyer of that coffee. And Brazil delivered about 1.3 million bags. And that helped to replenish the supply. But since then, it's only been when you've had weak differentials that coffee would come to the board, or if the market's at a steep backwardation, steep premium in the nearby market to make people willing to deliver coffee against the New York contract. So we have a problem that started 24 years ago for why you keep having the tightness in certified stocks on a more frequent basis. And when I look at the Brazilian 24-25 crop that was just harvested, so there's quality concerns. So is there going to be coffee from that harvest that is going to be delivered against the New York market? And if it's based on how much washed, semi-washed coffee they made, it's going to be a lot less. So Brazil isn't going to be the fallback for getting coffee to the board. And so I look at it as what is going to have to happen with the market structure to get coffee delivered. So coffee stocks have gone up from 233,000 to over 800,000, but there's still on a steady stream some coffee that's being removed.
And why?
Because it has accumulated age-related penalties, or because the cash market premiums are stronger, and therefore you would take coffee from the board. So roasters would use it. Or maybe, if the board isn't paying for carry, or you had at one point higher freight rates, and that there's, interest rates were high. So you don't want to hold that much in physical coffee, and the board became the cheapest place to secure that supply. So when the market's focused on quality and improving that quality, that creates a potential void for getting deliverable coffee. That's the catch-22.
Right. I have a question here. I'm hearing people say, I'm hearing exporters of specialty coffee say that the available stock of specialty coffee is being reduced, and their expectation for current harvests is that there will be less specialty coffee available because the C price is so high that it is better for them to sell their coffee into the commercial market. Will that not help replenish those stocks?
Well, the quality of that coffee is still there. So no, because part of it is, to have the specialty coffee, some of it becomes a cost consideration. So they're spending a lot of money to carefully pick the cherry.
Oh, but they're not.
Or roasters. Right.
They're not this time, right? So what they're saying is instead of picking a specialty and processing a specialty, they're strip picking, or they're just collecting it all off the ground and sending it to the commercial market. Whereas in previous years, they would have processed a specialty coffee. So will that not help with the supply of the submission of coffee to the board?
No, because it doesn't mean they're going to do that, because they might not be getting 53 cents over, but they still might be getting 2 cents or 4 cents or 8 cents. Differentials are still positive to the board for that coffee.
Okay.
And therefore, they're not going to deliver it. The only thing that would be delivered, and what we've seen, is coffee that's been sitting around for a while, past crop coffees, that are no longer getting a positive differential as coming to the board.
Okay.
And that's a limited supply.
And so the impact of this is, are we expecting that there's going to be a limited supply this year and next year? Or we don't know yet for next year?
Well, if there's a large Brazilian 25-26 crop and everything goes well from here on out, and the trees don't react to the stresses that they've been under for the past 10 months with higher than normal temperatures and below normal rainfall, and you suddenly have ample rains and the tree recovers and the crop is spared from ruin, then the market's going to deflate somewhat. But until you know that, the market's going to be sitting on edge. And I always use the expression at this time of year that the market can climb a wall of worry on weather reports.
What we don't talk about, I don't think we've talked about it ever on this podcast, is Indonesian coffee. Because Indonesia produces a lot of coffee, right? What's the state of Indonesian coffee this year?
Oh, so Indonesia had 2 years of unfortunate timing in the rains.
Okay.
So obviously coffee is grown in many different areas in Indonesia. And the people of Indonesia, the Indonesian coffee growers and the exporters, the industry is phenomenal.
Beautiful people.
And even more so is that they love coffee. They're passionate about drinking it also. And some of the most innovative coffee beverages are found in Indonesia. Whether they mix it with avocado and all sorts of creative drinks that you don't see in many other places. So they had a problem with some erratic weather, and Indonesia has been, in a situation where they're trying to supply the export market and fuel the domestic market because there's competition there.
Do they deliver to the coffee to the board? Do they deliver to certified stocks?
So remember that a good portion of their production is Robusta. And so that goes to the London market. And
same with Vietnam, right?
Right. So you don't see the Vietnamese coffee being delivered. And right now, you're never going to see it being delivered for Indonesia, India, or Vietnam because the differentials are so strong in the Asian Robusta market that what you see London certified stocks coming up since March. You've had a small build in the stocks. And what that is Brazil has been shipping record amounts of Robusta coffee, and that's finding its way to the London Robusta market.
Okay. I can hear people listening to this thinking, I just want to make a V60. They just want to make coffee. They didn't get into this industry realizing how intense it is to understand the supply chain around all this stuff and how involved supply and demand economics would be in the future of our industry. And when we talk about a coffee crisis, particularly when we're talking on this subject of the overall outlook on supply and demand and pricing and all of this kind of stuff. I can't help but ask, is it going to get more complicated, or is it going to find a way to become simplified?
Right.
You've been here a long time in this industry. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, no, it's as complicated as it gets.
Okay.
So there's not going to be a change in the way coffee moves or the structure of the board or anything like that. That's going to stay the same. The influences, I mean, I've been doing this for 40 years, and it's, the same old problems. They just repeat themselves once every 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and in recent years with more frequency.
Okay.
But the underlying issues are still the same.
Okay. In the next episode, folks, we're going to talk some more about backwardation and differentials and how they influence the market. So join us for that episode. Peace, love, and peanut butter. Have an amazing rest of your day. I really hope you enjoyed this episode, friends. Please don't forget to show us some love by subscribing, liking, commenting, and most of all, sharing this podcast with your friends. Check the show notes for links, including our sponsors and our Patreon. And stay tuned for more great conversations on the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward.